Hello everybody, welcome to another video in the Anglo Zulu War series, and today what we're going to be looking at is a bit of a hobby and a history video which I haven't done for a while, but we're going to be focusing on the British Naval Brigade and its role in the Anglo Zulu War. As you can see, I've completed a contingent of the Naval Brigade here, but I actually wanted to take some time to sort of summarise their sort of actions in the war and sort of how they operated, which then gives me plenty of chance to sort of use them in multiple battles. Now, while I'm not going to be gaming just historical battles, because as you'll learn in the history, the Naval Brigade sort of saw less action in the second half of the war, I think this is a perfect little contingent to accompany a number of other companies of the standard British Army for some adventures in Zululand. So what I'm going to start off by doing is by going through the history. Now, the video will be split up into the history section and hobby section, so if you want to see the hobby section, you can just click down below and that'll take you straight to it. But I hope you stick around for the history, grab a cup of tea, and let's get stuck into it. Right, so let's have a look at the history of the Naval Brigade. Now, there are multiple sources that you can go and have a look at for these. However, I do recommend having a look at the Naval Brigade in South Africa, 1877, 78, 79, which is an account by Fleet Surgeon Henry Nobry. That's published by Pen and Sword at the moment. There are multiple editions though, and I think you can actually even just download it online. There's an excellent paper as well by Brian Best, which is called The Naval Brigade in Zululand, where he takes a lot of the information that Henry Nobry gave and he uses that along with some other sources and does a really good job at summarising it. I'll put a link to that paper down below. It really is fantastic. On top of that though, I must say, if you again just go and have a look at the Fleet Surgeon Nobry's Naval Brigade in South Africa, because there are so many lovely little anecdotes in there, lots of little things to inspire you to give ideas about, you know, how to model your bases, including the ideas for things like chicken coops. Now, before I get on with the history, I must just say I am going to try and pronounce some of these names of the battles and the places, and if I wreck them, then I do apologise, but I'd rather have a go at doing it than not try at all. So, with that out the way, let's get started. It was not until Victoria's reign that the Royal Navy was equipped and prepared to go on campaign with the army. With so many warships patrolling far-flung seas, the Navy was frequently called upon to supply men and guns to fight in many of Victoria's campaigns. The Admiralty divided up the disposition of its ships into areas, and here these vessels would stay for years at a time, with the crews being rotated every few years or so. During the 1870s, Southern Africa was within the scope of the Cape of Good Hope and West Africa Station. The Commodore's ship was the 3,000-ton HMS Active, which was built in 1869. Like all warships of that time, she was steam-driven but also fully rigged for sail. Her crew had taken part in the Ashanti War of 1873-74, and it was the Active that took the new commanding officer, Lord Chelmsford, from Cape Town to Durban to prepare for the invasion of Zululand. With the war against the Zulus following so quickly, Active was again asked to supply men for the invasion of Zululand. This she did when 174 officers and men, with the addition of 43 Marines, disembarked at Durban on the 19th of December 1878. In fact, it was the sailors from Active who rowed the Zulu delegation across the Tugela, where they were confronted with the impossible British demands underneath the ultimatum tree. After they had disembarked, they then travelled up the coast to the mouth of the Tugela River, where they joined with the Buffs at the newly established Fort Pearson. When they arrived at Fort Pearson, Fleet Surgeon Henry F. Nobry noted that there was 3 cheers for the Blue Jackets. The men cheered most cordially, but their cordiality also took more substantial shape, for they had provided 2 large casks of ale, which they presented to our men, and the officers had prepared quite a grand luncheon at the little hotel, to which we were invited. The plan for the men from HMS Active was to advance on the mission at Ashoe and establish a fortified supply depot for them to garrison. From here, the rest of the column would advance on Elundi in conjunction with the other 2 columns invading Zululand from other points along the border. So, what about the uniforms and equipment? Well, the officers wore either a dark blue double-breasted frock coat or a single-breasted 5-button tunic with blue trousers and calf-length white canvas gaiters. Mostly, they wore their peaked naval caps, but did wear the Foreign Service helmet dyed blue. The sailors wore their traditional blue loose-fitting jerseys with open neck wide collars. Blue or white trousers were tucked into leather-bound tanned canvas gaiters. Those on the march wore wide straw Senate hats with the name of their ship painted around the blue band. Compared with the British infantrymen, the sailors were dressed more suitably for marching in the tropical heat, and as a consequence they suffered less. Both officers and men wore brown leather belts and ammunition pouches. The men were generally armed with Martini Henry rifles and the 1871 pattern naval cutlass, with the pommel machine to take a bayonet lug. In contrast to the army, the navy put a great emphasis on weapons training, and the crews were thoroughly schooled in both firearm and cutlass drill. In addition, HMS Active supplied 2 12-pound Armstrong field guns, 2 rocket tubes, and a Gatling gun. The Naval Brigade gained a reputation for enjoying themselves. One observer noted that the sailors' camp was alive with music, singing, and good-humoured banter. As was their habit, the sailors soon made pets of monkeys and birds. They also cultivated vegetable patches and built coops for chickens that they had acquired, which I think would be a really good opportunity for some modelling. Although no angels, the Blue Jackets appear to have been a disciplined outfit, and there was only one serious defaulter during 8 months of campaigning. This contrasted with the army, who resorted to flogging on such a scale that public outcry led to its total abolition. On the 6th of January, the Naval Brigade was increased by the arrival at Fort Pearson of a landing party from HMS Tenedos, which brought about 40 more Blue Jackets to the group. HMS Tenedos was a 1,755-ton wooden-built corvette which had been transferred from the West Indies station. Colonel Pearson was ready to cross the river on the 11th of January, a task that took 2 days to complete. On the 13th of January, all but 70 men of Active and some from Tenedos were carried across the river and onto Zulu soil. From there, the march progressed as planned. When they were within a day's march of their destination, the Zulus close to the crossing attacked the vanguard of the column over the Ineziene River. In a sharp battle in which confusion seemed to reign, the men of the Naval Brigade were key. Fleet Surgeon Norbury, who was present, observed, "There was a crowd towards the top of the hill, on the left of the road, which was stubbornly held by a strong body of the enemy, forming a left horn of the Zulu army. But the rocket party of the Naval Brigade, under Mr. Cotter, boatswain, having sent a rocket right through one of the huts, set the kraal on fire. The Natal Native Regiment then advanced and drove out the Zulus, taking possession of the kraal. The Zulus were repulsed and put to flight, leaving some 400 dead on the battlefield. Along with the men of the Buffs, the Naval Brigade formed a line that beat off the main attack from the right horn. The Gatling gun was rushed to the British centre on top of a knoll. Under the command of the 19-year-old midshipman Lewis Cadwallader Corker, it was used to drive back the Zulus from a position in which they were taking cover. With the action concluded, the Zulus fell back. However, this small victory was completely overshadowed by the events about to take place at Isandlwana, about 50 miles away. Pearson's column reached its destination at Ashoe. When news of the defeat at Isandlwana reached them, it was decided it would be safer to stay put rather than risk the retreat back to Natal. The troops then set about erecting defences at Ashoe. Norbury commented that the church and vestry were loopholed and all of the outlying tents removed to within the enclosure. The 4 7-pounder guns, 2 of which belonged to the Naval Brigade, the Gatling and the rocket tubes were placed in position. The church tower, from which a very extensive general view could be obtained, was used as a lookout, and one of our signalmen with his telescope was stationed therein. I placed all the sick and wounded on stretchers inside the church, which I fitted up as a hospital, having had several holes cut near the ground to increase ventilation. With these actions, and with the encircling Zulu forces, this saw the beginning of the siege of Ashoe. Interestingly, very little fighting took place, but the monotonous rations and increasing sickness in the confines of the mission would take its toll. Between the 23rd of January until their relief on the 3rd of April, 26 men died, mostly of fever, including 5 of the Naval Brigade. Especially mourned was Midshipman Corker, who we mentioned earlier, who was struck down by dysentery on the 16th of March, having insisted on sleeping with his Gatling gun that he commanded at the battle, covered only by a greatcoat. HMS Shah was the next vessel to arrive with a landing brigade. Built in 1873, she was a 6,250-ton ironclad frigate, although she rated more as a first-class cruiser. These men were drafted into Chelmsford's new column, which was being assembled and would be part of the relief force for Ashoe. Soon after Shah's arrival, another warship arrived at Durban and disembarked 228 seamen. This was the 3,913-ton iron-hulled corvette HMS Boadicea. Built in 1876, she had been delayed because of an outbreak of smallpox and had had to serve a period of quarantine. Now, with her men, the total strength of the Naval Brigade in the conflict numbered close to 900. Chelmsford's relief column was large and consisted of 3,400 British soldiers and 2,300 members of the Natal native contingent. Their progress, like Pearson's before them, was slow going. However, it seemed that they had learned the lessons of Isandlwana, and the column entrenched each night. This was all to their benefit as the Zulus were about to launch a major attack. Chelmsford's laager was sited on a 300-foot ridge running roughly east to west. West of the ridge, the ground dipped only to rise again to the 470-foot Uzumi Hill. The ground sloped away in all directions, allowing a good field of fire. A trench surrounded a waist-high wall of earth which enclosed 120 wagons formed into a square. While these defences were being constructed, mounted scouts spotted small parties of Zulus in the distance. That evening, a mist covered the valley, and a reconnaissance force from the British found an impi composed of about 12,000 warriors, all of whom had been at Isandlwana and had been ordered to ambush the relief column, as this was their final chance to stop it before it reached Ashoe. However, the Zulus did not attack that night. At dawn on the 2nd of April 1879, the morning sun revealed muddy ground and a heavy mist. Chelmsford could not move his wagons until the ground dried, so he sent forward the Natal native contingent to provoke the Zulus into an attack, while he held a strong position. Once the mist lifted, the left horn of the impi was seen advancing eastwards over the ground towards the British laager before disappearing into the tall grass. A long burst of fire from one of the Gatling guns saw the warriors disappear into the long grass. When the left horn re-emerged, it joined the rest of the impi, and the left horn, the chest, and the right horn were advancing over the Uzumi Hill. The Zulus then attacked in a run on the three sides of the laager. At a range of about 300 to 400 yards, the British infantry opened fire, supported by the Gatling guns and rockets. Zulu marksmen caused a few casualties within the laager, but the defenders kept the Zulus at bay. Though the Zulu regiments made persistent rushes to get within stabbing range, their charges lacked the drive and spirit that had pushed them forward at the battles of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift. In fact, the only Zulu apparently to reach the laager was a 10-year-old boy, who was then taken prisoner by members of the Naval Brigade and later served as a sort of mascot on HMS Boadicea. After 20 minutes, the impi began to crumble, and Chelmsford ordered pursuit by the mounted troops and the native contingent. Many Zulus were killed as they ran. This became known as the Battle of Ginginlovo. The Zulus had fled, and the British began to kill the Zulu wounded. Around the laager, 700 Zulu bodies were counted, and 300 more were reckoned to have been killed during the pursuit. The British suffered 11 dead, including a lieutenant colonel, and 48 wounded. This battle restored Chelmsford's confidence in his army and their ability to defeat Zulu attacks. With the last resistance between Chelmsford and Pearson's columns removed, he was able to advance and raise the siege of Ashoe. For the Naval Brigade, there were to be no more battles. They were, however, actively involved in the re-invasion as part of the new coastal column commanded by General Henry Creelock. The Blue Jackets were involved in building and manning a couple of forts to guard the supply route and to bring in some other supplies. The Zulu War reached its bloody and tragic climax with the short but bloody battle at Ulundi. With the war over, the Naval Brigade was to be broken up. Tenedos had already departed with her crew, and the crews of HMS Active and HMS Shah made it through the surf at the mouth of the river Tugela and embarked on a ship which then took them to Durban. Here they joined the Shah, which sailed to Simon's Bay, where the Active was waiting. HMS Boadicea remained at Durban and supplied her landing brigade for the ill-fated war against the Boers in 1880 to 1881. HMS Shah, Active, Tenedos and Boadicea were made obsolete within a few years of the Zulu War ending. This is due to the rapid pace of warship design, and they were either scrapped or used as block ships in port. However, as a final note, it is of interest to note that when it was finally broken up in 1919, HMS Shah's masts were used to replace those of HMS Victory at Portsmouth, which is still there to this day. Okay, so I hope you found that brief sort of history of the Naval Brigade interesting. So here they are. This is how I'm going to represent them on the battlefield. Now, because I'm playing my games, I would say I'm probably going to be using maybe 6 or 7 companies of British. I didn't want to do more than this. I just want to have them represented on the table rather than having, you know, sort of a full brigade of, say, 800 men. So all of these miniatures are from Empress Miniatures, and they do a Naval Brigade deal, which is what I went for, and I'll link that down below. And in that you get one each of all of the packs, and then I added the Gatling gun and the rocket tube. So you can see what I've done here again. I've used the big red bat bases, and I've just tried to position them on here to kind of just, again, create an interesting scene. Now, one of the things which I'm going to point out straight away, which is a complete contradiction to what they wore, I've done the officer wearing a white service helmet. That's just for very, very selfish reasons. I wanted it to stand out. Now, they would either have been tanned or dark blue. I just done it white as the sort of traditional colours, just because I wanted it to stand out on the battlefield, and I'd already painted so much blue on here that I just wanted to do something a little bit different. So here we can see we have the officer, we have an NCO as well, and then we have a whole load of the sailors as well. And what I really like is you get a mix of the Senate hats and the peak caps as well, which you can see on the officers, and then these sort of forage caps that they're wearing. So I've got to admit, I did wimp out. I did originally try to write the ship's name on the band that goes around the hat. However, that just looked rubbish, and then I just tried to do a few squiggles, and that looked even worse. So I thought, right, I'm just going to cut my losses, and I'm just going to leave it as it is. As you can see, the gaiters for these guys, I've done them all as the tan leather, with the exception of the officers, who have got the white gaiters. Have a look at this one here. Again, you can see I've tried to position them so there's actually some sort of flow to what they're doing. So these ones are actually looking off this way rather than just straight ahead. So there's actually, you get the impression of sides to the unit. I've tried to mix in just various poses. So you've got firing poses at the front, you've got guard poses, and then you've got some reloading ones at the back. Now, these sculpts are absolutely lovely. Now, I think, don't quote me, I think Paul Hicks sculpted these for Empress, and you can really see that in the facial details and designs. There is a lot of character in all of these, and no two of these miniatures are the same. So if you get that Naval Brigade deal, this actually gives you a really nice selection of miniatures to create a unit with. So there we are. Basing wise, I've done exactly what I normally do, which is I create this earth paste mix and then make it a little bit redder to represent sort of the soil in Zululand. Then I put down layers of summer grass and then dead grass with a static grass applicator, and then I chuck in tufts and bushes and undergrowth and things. However, because of the number of miniatures on the base, I didn't want to overdo it. I think that's more than enough, and I do like being able to leave some earth showing so you can see some patches. However, let's have a look at the artillery. So we'll come on to that one in a minute. Here is my Gatling gun. This was lovely to paint. Bit of a pain to put together, but lovely to paint. As you can see, if you the photos that we're looking at during the history, it's a very nice design. Now, in the game, if you're playing this in black powder, the Gatling gun does have specific rules. So you're not just sort of using your normal artillery rules or trying to come up with something. There are rules for rapid-fire weaponry. So I've stuck it on one of these round bases, which is a 70mm base. You can see it's all magnetized as well. And I'm really pleased with it. I think it's going to hopefully do well. So there is one corner there. Now, let's talk about the rocket tube. Now, if you've watched my previous black powder battle reports or anything I've done which involves rockets, you know that if I see a rocket, I've got to have one. Now, those of you who watch the Plastic Crack podcast will have seen me trying to stick this together, and it nearly broke me. In fact, I think it did break me. It did break me. See, look what it did to me. This was awful to put together. Not the men, and in fact, I actually had one man left over from this lot down here. This chap here, so I put him on this base here near the chap commanding the rocket battery. So not quite sure what he's meant to be offering him, but I thought that would be quite fun. My tripod was slightly broken. I think. I can't actually tell you if it was or if it's designed that way. I assume it was. It's very flimsy trying to get it stuck together. You then have a tiny connection point to then stick this rocket tube on. So in the end, what I ended up doing was sticking the legs to a postage stamp size piece of card and then using Gorilla Glue gel to kind of jam little bits of rock and other bits into to just kind of stabilize it. And then I had this balanced on some sticky tack, and where I left it alone for about 3 days before I was brave enough to go near it. I then just stuck that straight onto the base and put the basing paste over it because I'm scared that is going to come off. But Now, painting it, that was a lot of fun, and painting the crew as well. So now we have to chat with the binoculars. We have the signalman there with the flags. And we have the guy with the fuse, ready to light it. Always do enjoy a rocket in games. Now, to get this blue, I used Ultramarines blue contrast paint from GW as the base, and as always I Zenithal highlighted all of these. I used Ultramarines blue over the top as my base coat, and then to get the highlight color, all I did was I mixed a little bit of this Ulf 1 grey into the palette where the Ultramarines blue was, and while that was still wet, I just then went over and did all my highlights. When you've got such a lot of blue, even when you compare it to something like, you know, the French in the Napoleonic period, you know, even there you've got different trouser colours and things. I needed to kind of pick out other colours, so that's why I've added a little bit more white here and there, and that is the main reason why I seem to have done quite a lot of sort of ginger beards or really light brown beards, because I just wanted colours to stand out from all of that blue. And I think it's come together well. So yeah, let me know what you think down below. Okay, so going forward, I would like to have maybe another 9-pounder for these guys. I'm not going to get any more troops like that. I might paint the odd Naval Brigade chap onto a command base or some kind of interesting objective scene or something like that. But my overall idea for my British Army at the moment is that I'm going to have 4 units of British Line, so the red coats, so 4 companies of that. Then I'll have the 1 company of the Naval Brigades, that's 5. Then I'd like a company of the Green Jackets, so that would be the 60th Rifles. So I have 6 line companies of British, then maybe 2 companies of the Natal native contingent, and then I'll probably put in some cavalry, and that would actually be my entire British Army. As I say, the kind of a level I want to play the Zulu games at isn't on the same level that I want to do the Napoleonic games. That being said, I'm going to need probably about 3 times as many Zulus. So now I've painted these, I'm probably going to actually, no, thinking about it, I have still got some British to do. So what I'm probably going to paint next for my Zulu War Project is a command base for my British. I have a commander from Emperor's Miniatures that I picked out that I'd like to paint up in a very cool pose. Then I'll probably move back on to more Zulus and we can just see how it's going. But anyway, I'll do what I always do and I'll leave some photos of these guys up at the end. As always, thank you for taking the time to check this out. Do take the time to go and check out the link down below if you are interested in the Naval Brigade. Thank you to all the people who gave me a little bit of advice and information on the Zulu War. I really am enjoying reading up about it. As I say, this one's a little bit more of a slow burn project for me here, and a massive thank you of course to all the channel members. I hope you guys are having a good weekend, and I will be back with another update soon, so take care of yourselves. Bye bye.